Hey everyone, it's Richard Metal Fan here, bringing you guys a brand new 2021 album review. I meant to get this out yesterday, but I didn't really have the time to do it. Plus, I was like really tired from work and stuff. But today we're gonna bring you guys a new review, and this is pretty much one of my anticipated albums for 2021. And as you can see below the title, today we're gonna be looking into the new album from the band Carcass entitled Torn Arteries, which was released yesterday through Nuclear Blast Records. Um, Carcass, I really don't need to go much into detail. I'm sure some of you have probably heard of them already. Of just old school sounding death metal, been around since the late '80s. And I think originally they kind of started out just straightforward like grindcore, but I feel like over time they've kind of like evolved into sort of death metal, and a lot of people would also lump them in as melodic death metal, which I don't really consider them that, but I'm mostly with like maybe a little bit in the music, but I don't really consider Carcass melodic death metal. But that's just my opinion. I know they used to have in the band Michael Amott and Daniel Erlandson, who are of course now killing it with Arch Enemy. And this album follows up their seventh full-length album follows up their previous album, Surgical Steel, which was their comeback album, first album in over a decade or 2 decades. And I thought that was a great album, one of the best, my favorites from 2013. And I was really, this album, here we are 8 years later. And before that, last year, they released an EP called Despicable. And one of the songs called Under the Scalpel Blade was on that. And that's now they lumped it in on this album, Torn Arteries. And this album, oh my God, like I thought Surgical Steel was great. Right, but this album, damn, this is really great. Like, I honestly think Carcass can do no wrong. Like, they just, in my opinion, I think Carcass is one of the most underrated bands in death metal, in my opinion. One thing to note is just the production. The production's really good. Jeff Walker, like, he just sounds great as he did in the late 80s, early in the 90s. He just sounds just the same as ever. Has that sick voice. The guitar work on this album is tight. Bill Steer and Tom Draper's guitar playing, and just like the riffs they come up with is great. And that's just the one thing I love about Carcass. And Carcass is one of those bands that, for me, just never reuse riffs. They always have like new riffs upon new riffs every fucking time, and they just showcase it with this album. The bass I kind of wish was a little bit audible from Jeff. I kind of wish I could hear the bass more. And drumming wise, Daniel Whiting's drumming, he does a great job just killing it behind the kit. Just filling in, of course, in my opinion, one of my favorite drummers, Ken Owen, does a great job on the drums. So, without further ado, let's dive into this album track by track. Now, starting things off is the title track, Torn Arteries. Now, Torn Arteries just gets straight into just the death metal territory with just like really sick lyrics about like eating flesh, which is just typical for most death metal. That also harks back with like some of their early albums, such as like Recaputurification or Necroticism. And this song is just a killer track, and it just immediately just sets the mood and sets the whole pace for this whole fucking album, and you're pretty much in for a journey. And then we move on to Dance of Ixtab, which in parentheses, it's Psycho Pomp and Circumstance, March number 1. Now this song, compared to the title track, this is pretty much a slower song that pretty much highlights sort of Jeff's growls. It's a different sounding song from the band, but it's pretty much built rhythmically, mostly around the drums. And the march part of the title just comes through just like the rhythmic tom work, and it's a really good song. And I just feel like I don't know, it's just a pretty interesting song. Like we got from the title track to Dance of Ixtab. I think they're kind of like night and day. Moving on to Eleanor Rigor Mortis. Now this comes off as like a banger. It just clocks in about 4 minutes, and like the balance is sort of like the high riff assault with just some frequent groove breaks that kind of like sounds like just 90s old school death metal, kind of like entombed a little bit, with a bit more of an edge to the guitar work. Next song on the album is called Under the Scalpel Blade. Now this song was actually released back near the end of 2019. It appeared on last year's Despicable EP. And this song, it's pretty fast when it needs to be, but it also slows down to a groove too. It has a combination of like the classic guitar tone with a little bit more of progressive elements, but I wouldn't necessarily consider it a prog song, but it's a pretty good song. Moving on to The Devil Rides Out. Now, this song sort of like balances like a great sense of melodic sort of melancholy that in, goes well hand in hand with the vocal lines with some series of like impressive like technical guitar work, especially during the blast beats closing moments of the song. And it's fucking sick. Flesh Ripping Sonic Torment Limited. Now, this song, can only way I could describe it is just a very highly progressive journey that just showcases like about every outside influence that has been incorporated into sort of the whole death metal world. Kelly's Meat Emporium. Now, this song, a lot of people consider it to be kind of like a stock song by comparison, and I feel like this song originally was going to be called Stock Carcass, since it does feature meaty riffs that the band is pretty much known for, delivered with sort of like that surgical precision. And Jeff's like conviction and sort of like the way he does the vocals have some serious thunder, and it just goes full speed. Next song is called In God We Trust. Now, In God We Trust sort of like sports some just really, really highly yet like seamless shifts, and it's sort of like rivaling even sort of like the jarring tempo changes that could sort of like associate with sort of like the death metal's experimentation in the mid 90s. Then we move on to Wake Up and Smell the Carcass / Kavit Enter. Now, this song is pretty much different again, which has a groove riff and a hook that's kind of a bit repetitive that leads into a great drum passage with an almost hard rock riff. And the tone here is still different, but it's very I don't know, it's hard to describe it. It's different compared to like we've heard so far, and it utilizes like a clean guitar for texture, and the lead work on this song is spot on. And then we close things out with The Scythe's Remorseless Swing. Now, this song I think is a great way to end the album. It's a great song that starts somewhere different with a guitar duel and some great guitar or lead work, and Jeff sort of like changes up his vocal style to sort of like the deep billows to like almost kind of like the spoken word verses, and Steers also does some backing vocals, and I think that's one thing. It's also forgot that he also does some backing vocals, and I feel like his voice also really adds to this one too. It's sort of like increasing like the growl factor as well, and I think it's a great way to end this album. Now, overall, Torn Arteries by Carcass, great album, great follow-up to one of the best comeback albums I've heard in the last decade. So if I have to give this album a score, I'm going to give Torn Arteries by Carcass probably a solid 8.5 out of 10, or probably even a 9 out of 10, somewhere between there. So yeah, that's my review of the new Carcass album, guys. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about the album, and I'll see you all in the next video. And as always, keep it metal.